Hey all, welcome to Film Suck, a Patreon podcast in which we ponder the work of art in the age of crap cinema. I'm Eileen Jones, and my usual co-host Dolores McElroy is not with me tonight. She is working on the summer season of the Santa Fe Opera, which will be awesome, no doubt. So she'll be back in a couple of weeks. And I have a lineup of terrific guests, including, I'm fortunate to say, Forrest Flacko Miller is back with me to talk about all things Robert Mitchum with a focus on Out of the Past, his classic film noir. Um, so welcome, Forrest. So
Thanks
glad
so
you're
much for
here.
having me.
Thanks. And so thrilled because we get to talk again. And since we both really admire Mitchum, which is a necessity, I can't have anyone on here who is not an admirer because that would be weird. I just want to set us off with one anecdote, just orient us to, if you haven't heard it, who Robert Mitchum was as a star. It's a famous one. He's just become a big star. He gets busted for marijuana possession, and is sentenced to 50 days on a prison farm in Castaic, California. And this would have in 1948. This would have ended the career of any other star, but it fits so well with this kind of, insolent, nonchalant, tough guy persona, and he played it to the hilt. So when Life magazine sent reporters up there to cover this, and he was allowed to do an interview, he said wonderful things about how he was meeting a much better class of people at the prison farm, and he said this place is like Palm Springs without the riffraff. So it's so just accrued to his strengths as a star that he became a bigger star than ever, and it all worked to his advantage. So
I mean, I don't doubt the fact that he actually believed that because watching the documentary about him, he had to spend a lot of his teenage years on a Georgia chain gang.
chain gang,
So,
yes,
so
actually
it
did.
probably, I mean, like being put on a work detail in like a prison essentially, where he basically used his powers as a star to tell them he went in front of like the warden or whatever, and he's like, use me any way you want, you can so he was like posing for pictures with the broom in his hand and doing all
Yeah.
that stuff. So it probably was more, I mean, it has to be more like Palm Springs than a Georgia chain gang.
Oh, absolutely. He'd been in the hell of the prison system as a teenager. So yeah, and just the level of experience he already, the sense that he's always older than everybody, which I think Roger Ebert, who's a big admirer, said he always seems older than everyone else because he's had so much more life experience. That's Mitch. So we'll
Yeah.
get into a lot of his. The Georgia Chain Gang is a real peak crazy experience that he did have, and he escaped. My God,
I think
good luck on
twice.
that
I think two different
one.
times he was put, and
Yeah.
it was during the Depression.
Mm.
So it made sense why, because back then, like, he was riding the rails, so he was
Mhm.
going around, and his father
Yeah.
had died, and his mother, I think, wasn't fit to take care of them, and
Yes.
he had his little brother, and he had his sister, and he would just ride the rails until someone went, hey, this is because he's like a 12-year-old at this point.
Mm.
And then he all the way till he's like 18, but he's like, as a 12-year-old, they're like, this 12-year-old is not supposed to be riding the rails, just going hopping from place to place. Like, we got to take this kid in, so they would put
Mhm.
him on chain gangs.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. No, he had a very, very rough growing up experience. Poverty poor. His father's killed in a horrible accident. He works in the train yards. Killed in a terrible accident when I think he's 2 or 3 years old.
Yeah,
He's crushed between two cars that wind up somehow crashing together, and so he's got that built in his mind. And then they're of course
I
quite
wouldn't go for
poor.
the rail. I wouldn't ride the rails if that was what
Oh, I
happened to
know.
my
And then he
dad.
goes and rides the rails. You're like, man, aren't you terrible? But apparently he never was terrified. At least that's the sense you get sometimes with Mitchum. The risks he took, insane. So anyway, we're going to go into anecdote after anecdote. There's endless ones. And he was somewhat of a tall tale teller. So you couldn't always, he just loved to entertain during interviews. And he was so larger than life. But a lot of these are verified, and most of the ones we're going to tell, I'm assuming, are that other people can attest. Yeah, these are things.
Yeah, I was watching that. I mean, anyone that is interested in his life, Robert
Mhm.
Mitchum, The Reluctant Star. It's free on YouTube.
Mhm.
And so I was watching that documentary, and a lot of his brother's in it, and his brother doesn't look anything like him. His brother, at
Mhm.
least at the point that they did this documentary, which is
Yeah.
late in his life, his brother's kind of a bigger, like, chunkier guy with like a mustache. So, like,
Mhm.
complete opposite of what Robert
Yeah.
Mitchum looks like for most of his career. But
Mhm.
his brother verified the chain gang
Mhm.
story, and I guess he
Yeah.
lived as a beach bum after that in California, which is how he kind
Mhm.
of got discovered.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and we'll tell the whole story. His discovery stories are great. It's just like he really had a rough go until he just slides relatively easily. We'll talk. I mean, after making many B westerns and stuff. Well, we'll get into all that. Let's like try to pull in for just for people who don't know Mitchum well. Like define his star persona, and then we'll go back into the past. Robert Mitchum, Out of the Past, talking about Out of the Past. Just quickly, Out of the Past is a very famous film noir. It's probably the most famous after Billy Wilder's Double Indemnity. The one you recommend if you want someone to get a sense of what film noir is as a genre that it can be hard to describe. You tell them usually to see one of those two films that have all of the qualities. Flashback structure, intense low key lighting. So you get this heavy black and white intensity going with light. Fatalism, an anti hero. Who's probably doomed from the outset, and I can go on and on listing, but a femme fatale figure who's going to betray him to his doom, all that kind of stuff are packaged within both those films. But Out of the Past is one of them. It's a great
Yeah,
film by
and
Duchamp.
also like a Mary Sue character. I feel like a
Oh
lot of
yes,
good,
the nice
uh,
girl.
yeah, a lot of good noir films always have the femme
Yeah,
fatale on one side, and then it has kind of the Mary Sue character on the other side, like a virgin and a devil kind of thing
right.
going on for it, and
Exactly.
and
It's
the
the
man and the man is like helplessly caught between them
yeah.
until he does something that either gets himself killed or gets
Mhm.
gets one of them to go to prison, or something always happens that in the end he picks between them, but usually there's somebody, it's either an assistant or just like a romantic love or somebody that,
Mhm.
and Out of the Past definitely has that.
Yes, and he's always fatally drawn to the woman, even if he can see she's bad news. Maybe because he can see she's bad news,
Yeah.
which is part of the key to his fate. But let me quickly indicate, he's Mitchum and his stardom is very strongly associated with film noir. He made lots of them. He made lots of films in every genre. Just made lots of films, and we'll get into some of the other top genres where he tends to star. But film noir is always listed first, and they include The Locket, Crossfire, Where Danger Lives, The Racket, The Big Steal, His Kind of Woman, Macau, Foreign Intrigue, Angel Face, Friends of Eddie Coyle, The Yakuza, Farewell My Lovely, and The Big Sleep. And I think I'm probably missing a couple because, again, he made so damn many films. But Out of the Past is the best known and the most associated with Mitchum's stardom, very unique stardom. So let's get into a little of Out of the Past and use it to define, what is the Mitchum star persona?
I mean, Out of the Past is definitely an interesting one because he is, I think, unquestionably in this movie the protagonist,
Yes.
and he's which he was on multiple occasions, but
Mhm.
his best known roles are obviously, two of them are like Night of the Hunter and Cape Fear, where he's the villain of all villains. So
Mhm.
this one is, I think, very interesting because he's a protagonist, but he's a very Bogart kind of person in this. He's a
Mhm.
private detective, which again, the noir thing, and
Mhm.
who's left the world of being a private detective after this kind of traumatic thing happened, which led
Mhm.
to the femme fatale character killing his partner, and
Mhm.
and that the second he reemerges as himself, he's going to get blamed for that murder
Mhm.
because she's such a kind of the devilish person.
Mhm.
Um, so he's reinvented himself and he's running a gas station.
Mhm.
And he's changed his name. And then the beginning of the movie, essentially, he has this deaf kid working for him where, he speaks to the kid in sign language. So that shows like
Mhm.
sensitivity to these things. And, the final, like in the beginning of this, it's been 3 years, which is not a very long time, I don't think
Mhm.
but I guess at this point it kind of is because, it's 1947. So it's a year before his marijuana arrest also in real life. But this is, I think,
Mhm.
probably one of the last movies he does before
Mhm.
his marijuana arrest. And
Mhm.
the kind of assistant to this guy it was played by Kirk Douglas. So Kirk Douglas is like the villain in this, and then
Yep.
Robert Mitchum's the hero. And
Mhm.
so Kirk Douglas is kind of assistant slash. There's a lot of I think there's a lot of like old movie symbology that would assume that this is kind of a queer character, like queer coded, like it's the
Mhm.
kind of character who's always receiving the cigarette
Mhm.
from somebody else. But he
Mhm.
comes and he's like, oh well, my boss wants to see you one more time, and that's kind of where
Mhm.
the movie begins.
Mhm. Yes, where he's at this gas station and he's the most what? the most jaded and world weary character you can imagine. So again, very film noir. It's almost always someone who has traveled some sort of rough road in life and looks it. And so Robert Mitchum he's got an amazingly iconic American face. It's kind of long jawed. It's got, and these famously hooded eyes that make him look even weirier just because of the way his eyelids are. And he plays it in a very strong. He and Kirk Douglas did not like each other much, and they were hugely competitive with each other, and each was
Yeah.
determined to steal the movie. And they take exactly opposite tacks, which is good for the movie. But Kirk Douglas gives a great performance. He's wonderful. He does this kind of manic good cheer. There's this kind of killer
Yeah.
smile on his face all the time. And he'll be saying things like, I hate surprises myself. What, do you want to just shut the door and we'll just forget the whole thing? This is when he
Yeah.
shows up and he's tracking the guy down. He's terribly menacing, and you know this all the time. But he's very, very manic and amusing about it. So he goes high energy, which is usually what Kirk Douglas does. He's kind of an exhausting actor, though I love him. Mitchum goes exactly the opposite way. He's and this will be part of reviews for many of his films. It's like he's practically falling asleep. He's so supine in one scene. He's lying on his spine in a chair. He's so refusing to compete on Douglas's, high energy ground that he pulls. It's like he pulls the planet of the movie off its orbit into his own groove. And he was very smart as an actor, even though we'll get into how contradictory he was about acting and the craft of acting and whether he was really acting at all. But he knew about rhythm. He loves music. We'll get into that too. And he has a great analysis of how movies have an established rhythm. And if you can mess with that rhythm, especially if you're a star and you're at all trying to draw it toward your character, you just figure out what that rhythm is and you counter it. So this is a great movie for watching him. He just seems to be this kind of still and dangerous because he is still, because it means he's smart and he's thinking and he's refusing to ever act impulsively. So he just pulls it to himself. And it's wonderful to watch this. I love watching actor competitions. They're marvelous. And this is one of the great ones. So that's what he's doing. So he's doing this, and Jacques Tourneur loved him for it. Jacques Tourneur loved actors who could be still on screen and but have such powerful charisma they could hold the screen without seeming to do anything. So he pitches his voice super low in this, and super quiet and super weary. So even in that opening scene where it's just gas station, nice girlfriend that he hopes to marry, she's blonde, she's sweet, she's innocent, she's small town, she's rural. She clearly does not understand him at all. This keeps coming up because, of course, he hasn't told her anything about his rather sordid past. He's a hero, but he's an anti-hero, classic, where he's got many fallibilities. He's very much drawn to darkness.
And he's definitely like a few levels below kind of the classic, not to compare everything to Bogart, obviously, but the Bogart character who's kind of willing to go into the seedy world. This is clearly someone who's even a few levels below that.
Yes. Where he's very well used to the seedy world. Yeah. From the seedy world, even knows it all too well. Very much, yeah. And so anyway, you establish him, and the minute there's the deaf boy, and he's being played by a child actor, and I'm forgetting his name, Dickie Moore, who gives actually a lovely performance. Doing all he's doing, he's treated quite badly by the gangster sent by the Kirk Douglas character to fetch Jeff Bailey, which is the name he's.
I couldn't remember. I guess Wit is the Wit is a classic Kirk Douglas kind of name.
Kind of name, it really is.
Wit old boy, please.
Little boy. Yes, and so this gangster, he's a black-coated thug, just communicating urban bad, and he comes to this little town and clearly recognizes the name, recognizes where he is, and to get the attention of the deaf boy, he hurls a just lit match from his cigarette at the back of the neck of the boy. So this just shows you the absolute callousness of that figure. Though he's a smart man, but he's not a nice man, that's for sure. But when you see the interplay between the deaf boy and who's standing out in the field while there's Jeff, they're fishing, he and his girlfriend, and he looks up and sees the kid, and the kid starts signing. And it's a wonderfully eerie shot of signing to him. And of course, Jeff has already picked up sign languages and language clearly and knows what he's saying. And he immediately, he still preserves a kind of stillness, but he's on absolute high alert underneath it. And the girlfriend is like, "Is something the matter?" And he's like, "Maybe not," in this very quiet voice that says, "There's definitely something. The worst thing has happened.
Yeah.
Witness found me." So anyway, so
And
that's wonderful.
yeah,
And
it's great because I feel like it also it shows this sensitivity that this character
Mhm.
has, because I think just learning the sign language and you know, having a deaf boy that's like, you know, he acts almost like the kid
And
is
it's his
his son
friend.
or like
Yeah.
his friend, but like, you know, he's like almost like a fatherly figure to him, that the kid
Yeah.
is you know, has this loyalty to him. So already from that you can sense the sensitivity that he has and the understanding that he has, as juxtaposed to the guy that just threw a match to the kid's neck.
Exactly right. And but it's a kind of wounded sensitivity underneath all of this toughness and hard-bittenness from just a very, very rough life, and a kind of guilty knowledge that he's brought this on himself. He actually, of course, is going to wind up getting assigned to go recover the very errant girlfriend of the gangster, Jane Greer's character. Her name is Kathy Moffat. She is shot wit, didn't kill him, winged him, and stolen $40,000 from him.
Couldn't
And
have
got
happened to a nicer guy.
and now he wants her back, and it's a little sinister. So Jeff is like, "What happens to her if she comes
Yeah,
back?"
there's you know, not to keep referencing this documentary, there's this great story about how when Kirk Douglas and Robert Mitchum first met on set for this movie, because you know, they
Mhm.
didn't know each other before then. Um, there's a very obviously the laconic persona that Robert Mitchum kind of takes on throughout this, which is, you know, very, very mellow. Apparently, Kirk Douglas tried to match his energy, and he was going to do like a very like a lower energy
Oh, he was going
performance.
to try it low
Yeah,
energy.
though
I
that was his
didn't know that.
original version of the like the, you know, the actor battle between them,
Yes,
and
I'll go
then
even slower than you. I'll be even
yeah,
stiller than you. Oh my God, I
and
didn't know
and then
that.
so then filming that, they're like, no, this isn't gonna work. Go back to like the manic thing, and the manic thing works so well in
Yes.
contrast to the Robert Mitchum performance in this, but
And it's
it's
more
just
it's more
yeah.
the energy that comes off of Kirk Douglas anyway. Mitchum can go pretty naturally into stillness. It's going to be tougher for almost always manic Kirk Douglas to do.
I mean, you can see it throughout you know, it's such a long movie, but like Spartacus, where
Yes,
Kirk Douglas throughout the entire movie is just high energy, going from place to place, running around with a sword, running around with, and it, you know,
he's great at
the
teeth gritted
broadsword.
rage. Use
Yeah,
those great
and
choppers.
if Kirk Douglas didn't have that manic energy, I don't think you could make it through like the 3.5 hour long Spartacus. Like,
Yes. Yes, and he's got to be driven. He's always a very driven character over and over. That's part of the whole. He puts his whole self bruisingly on the line. But yeah, there's wonderful. We should say something about the dialogue is wonderful in this film. And so there's a wonderful moment where the thug says about finding Jeff. He used to be Jeff Markham. Now he's Jeff Bailey, working at a gas station of all places. The thug says, "It's funny finding you here," and Jeff says, "Oh yeah, me and the kid, we laugh all the time." And it's just like there's these. He's just at such a beautiful, perfect level. I mean, you're right in mentioning Bogart. Only Bogart could do such world weary, cynical lines like that so beautifully. And Mitchum, I think, is even more at home because he lived a harder life and could draw an experience with that kind of just, I mean, again, insouciance. Here he is. He knows what he's facing. He's probably going to be killed. He's going to be taken back to this gangster who's furious because what happens is, of course, just quickly cutting to the chase, he falls in love with Kathy Moffat because everybody would fall in love with Kathy Moffat.
yeah,
It's
it's, I
played by
mean, it's
young
Jane
Jane
Greer
Greer.
kind of at her prime, like 2 years after she
Oh,
gets into the film industry. So she's like
she's
at her most beautiful in this, and it's not she's actually not a very experienced actress at this point, which is
mhm.
not something that I would have guessed from
You
her
wouldn't guess from
performance.
how she plays it, yeah.
Yeah, to the point where apparently what the first thing she asked Robert Mitchum is, "Am I on my mark?" Like she didn't, you know,
Mhm.
she wasn't fully, because I think the first two things she did was kind of more like action type stuff, or like she was in Dick
Mhm.
Tracy in 1945, but this is
Mhm.
only 2 years after that.
Mhm.
So she's like asking pretty much, "Am I on my mark?" And he like kind of pulls her
Mhm.
to her mark to be like,
Yeah.
"No, you're right here." And they have a lifelong friendship after
Yes.
being on this movie. They're kind of because this is such an iconic Robert Mitchum role. Also, they're kind of inseparable in the public eye.
Right.
Um, because like even to the point where SNL, when Robert Mitchum hosted, you know,
Mhm.
decades later in the 80s, um, you know, I think it was the 80s. It might have been the early 90s. They had Jane Greer come back and do like a sequel to Out of the Past called like
That's
Out of Gas.
I'm guessing. Yes, and then their lifelong friendship is super touching. His main friends in life are women, and so we're going to get into that as one of the contradictory elements of of the Mitchum persona in life and on film, in that his best friends were Jane Russell, who I also, of course, co-starred with in Macau and His Kind of Woman. She was his best lifelong friend, and the only non-family member who was at his funeral, and the only one who was allowed to see him in the end when he was dying of both emphysema and lung cancer simultaneously. But being Mitchum, he's on oxygen. He would literally take the oxygen mask away and take a puff off a cigarette. That's Mitchum all over. But he wouldn't let Jane Greer come and see him. And Jane Greer talked to Jane Russell and said, "Why won't he let me come to see him?" And Jane Russell was like, "Honey, he doesn't want you to see him looking like he looks now." So it was very sweet that right up to the very end, they're in attendance on him. And of course, his other best friend, especially professionally, and they worked together 4 times, I think, Deborah Carr, whom he absolutely revered and basically said, a little bit of bragging there, one of the few leading ladies that actually had stayed platonic. I never had sex with her, but he just absolutely revered her. So, but when you look for the best friends of Robert Mitchum, they're pretty much all women. So that
but while at the same time, like he only had one wife, and they never divorced, despite
57 years.
He definitely had affairs and all of that, but they stayed together throughout this entire thing, and they raised multiple children, including one of his sons looks exactly like him, and he cast actually in, like, he started his acting career in Thunder Road,
playing his younger brother.
Yeah.
That's James Mitchum.
Because he's only supposed to be in the movie. He clearly wrote this part for himself to, because he's like, oh, and then this woman falls in love with me, and then this woman falls in love with me. he's essentially, he came up with the story for Thunder Road. It's like his passion project.
Yeah.
But
and,
it's
of course, he was having so many affairs that literally other women in Hollywood would ask Dorothy Mitchum, "How do you put up with it?" I mean, he had a very long, I think it was several years long affair with Shirley MacLaine. It was Ava Gardner. It was Gene Simmons. It was, and he was always off on movies, and he loved to travel, and he was just out and about all the time, and he had a lot of affairs. But he was so dedicated to her, and she said, "This is something that between me and Bob that goes back to when they were kids. She was 14, he was 16 when they first meet. They get married when he's in his early 20s. They have kids by the time he's in his, right away. So he's got a couple of kids that keeps him out of World War II until 1945, when he gets up, to do minor. He's finally drafted as a medic and only serves a few months in California. So he was lucky in that, that would keep you out of the war for a while anyway. But that's also part of he just started living in having an overwhelming, intense adult experiences super early in life. But it's one of the few Hollywood marriages that hangs together forever. And Dorothy was just like,
he makes it to 79. Like, it's not, which is kind of one of the fascinating things, because he's living so hard, and obviously, he dies of lung cancer and emphysema. He's always smoking, but 79 is not like young. Like, it's not like he burned bright, or and died young. He actually made it quite a long time on the scene.
Considering, and he was a legendary drinker too. So he was not taking good care of himself. Let's just say. Yes. But anyway, so again, he falls in love. Let's back to Out of the Past. He falls in love with the Kathy Moffat character, and he and Kathy Moffat run off together, and just move away. And then he doesn't know who she is. She's absolutely this divine presence, and he's completely obsessed with her. And there's wonderful voiceover narration where he says,
and I love it, because it's unlike the things where it's you're kind of listening to a disembodied voice, kind of in a lot of these, where it's just like, oh, I walked down here to check it out. He's actually telling the story to this young girl in the car, that the girl is completely smitten with him, the same way he's kind of completely smitten in these scenes with the Kathy Moffat character. So he's like, I've never told anybody, or like, especially, never told you this, but I've also never told anyone in this town what happened to me. And it's this he's like, oh, this happened 3 years ago, which is like, dude, that's not that long ago. But
and he says a very typical thing, a very sweet thing to her before he's like, it's gonna hurt you. Yeah. So again, there's this with Mitchum. It's always, are you getting the very sweet Mitchum? Are you getting the angel or the devil Mitchum? And it's going to be a toss-up. And this is in his personal life as well as on his on-screen life by a million reports. So yes, he's this is all in his told too, this whole flashback. And he knows in order to be with her, they have to hide out. So they wind up in San Francisco, and he's like, I worked the lowest jobs as a private detective. He's still doing that kind of work.
Well, before they wind up in Mexico City, and
Yes.
then he goes to Mexico City. Then he goes to Acapulco. So they
Yes.
meet in Acapulco, in this bar, and
Mhm.
there's this great scene where this guy comes up to them and he's trying to hawk all of his stuff, and he's
Yeah.
I think his name's Don. He was like Don Jose or something like that, and
Something
he's
like
like,
that.
yeah, he's like, I'm a tour guide. He's like doing the whole thing, and from that point, it kind of becomes this inside joke between the two of them. Like,
Mhm.
did he ever know how bad a tour guide he really
He
is?
really was. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because he brought us together essentially. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful, little mini intense romance they have where and again the voiceover narrations, I didn't know what we thought we were doing. Did we think we were going to wake up, with hangovers in Niagara Falls? We weren't even thinking how this was going to end. And she's Kathy Moffat. It's revealed pretty quickly that she knows perfectly well he's been sent by Wit and he's there.
Yeah,
And so
and
it's always a
throughout
question.
this whole thing, she's insisting that she didn't steal the
Yes.
$40,000, and they make it back, to like California, but they're hiding out in this place, and she, the it's not even Wit that tracks them down; it's the partner, Jack Fisher.
Yes.
This kind of,
His old
he says,
detective
yeah.
agency partner is the one who
And he
follows it.
basically says the
Like,
only
figure it out.
thing this kind of doofus is good for is actually like tracking people.
He can
So he
track
manages to track them down to this tiny little like place that they're like shacked basically that they're shacked up in.
in the
And
woods. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they're fighting, and there's this drawn out fight between the two of them where nobody's winning this fight. They're just hitting each other and then going
Mhm.
back and hitting each other and going back.
Mhm.
Like, so this fight is between the two of them, and finally the fight ends because Kathy Moffat picks up a gun and just shoots the
Shoots.
partner,
Mhm.
and she flees.
Well,
And
and she
as he
says, "You
looks,
never would have done it."
yeah,
And he's like, "Why did you kill him?"
yeah, because
You
he
would
he
know.
also just knocks him down, and like, he's starting to get back up, and then he gets shot. And but as he looks down, he realizes that she did in fact steal the
Yeah,
$40,000.
she's
Like,
left her bank book, a little
yeah,
unlikely, that says 40,000. It's a little bit of movie magic there, but
yeah,
that's how he finds out she lied about everything. Because earlier she tries to tell him, she's pretending to be honest about it. I swear to you, I was desperate to get, it's the whole he was abusive. I was desperate to get away from him, but I swear I never took the money. And he's about to kiss her, and he's like, "Baby, I don't care."
yeah.
It's one of the great Mitchum lines. I don't care if you did it or
But yeah,
not.
but in that moment, I think it really comes to the realization. It's not that he cares that she did steal the money. It's that she lied about this, and obviously when she gets
And
back to
And she's a killer.
yeah,
And, so now he sees, oh my God, this whole thing. For all I know, she's never was remotely interested in me. She was just using me to get out of her situation.
which
The
I would
whole
say,
thing.
yeah, definitely that is the case.
But it's
Multiple times,
it's a telling line, the baby, I don't care. It's if you read his biography, which isn't that old, it's called Robert Mitchum, baby, I don't care. Because so much of his affect is that quality of shrugging.
yeah,
So that's how he went, and then of course that's how he winds up blasting open his whole life for this woman, who then wrecks everything and flees, and she winds up going back to Wit. So by the time Wit tracks him down and brings him, or has him come, and he knows he's running away, Wit's going to find him. He has to go to his fabulous house on Lake Tahoe for this meeting where he knows he's going to be he sort of tries to be a tough guy, tries to refuse the assignment that Wit wants to give him, because Wit is saying, "You owe me this." And he
yeah.
pretends he's
And
refusing.
there's these great lines throughout their whole interaction, which there is like this antagonism you could tell between the two of them. Like,
Between the two
sometimes
of
you could
them,
tell
it's
that there's this
unspoken.
chemistry between, like, you could definitely tell there's a lot of
Mhm.
chemistry between him and Jane Greer throughout this, but
Mm.
there's this antagonism that just doesn't mesh with him and Kirk
Mhm.
Douglas's character Wit. And he says something like, he's like, "What have you been doing?" He's like, "I've been working for a living, you should try it," or something. Have
Mhm.
you ever heard of it? And he's like, "Yeah,
Yes.
maybe I have, but not from you." uh
Yes, it's really a nice, and it does seem, you do feel like, shall we say, the Wit character might swing both ways, because he certainly seems fascinated more than makes sense by Jeff Bailey. Well, but they all are, because one of the qualities that comes with Robert Mitchum is he's always a wild card. That's what allows him to to pivot into vicious villain roles, or suddenly reveal sweetness and charm and gentlemanly qualities. So you don't know how to place where he's going to be next, and because of that unpredictability, Witt thinks he's got a solid way to frame Jeff Bailey. That's what he wants. He gives him an assignment, and clearly Jeff Bailey knows he's framing. He knows that Witt wants revenge. So as soon as he gets the assignment, he knows he's got to get himself out of this trap, whatever it is.
I think taking noir classes, I focus on this a little bit too much, but I always look at the who's lighting whose cigarette, because it's such a language of this unspoken, like a lot of times homoeroticism within
eroticism and cigarettes in movies.
Yeah. Well, but like when a man lights another man's cigarette, there's like a homoeroticism to that thing.
Yeah.
So one of the first, when Robert Mitchum comes back, you see him lighting Kirk Douglas's cigarette, and then it flashes to his second in command, Joe, who's this incredibly like high strung, very kind of feminine character. Throughout this, like he's even more high strung. He's doing the opposite side of this, where when they first meet, he's more high strung than Kirk Douglas is.
Right.
Kirk Douglas is kind of sitting, and he has this, like, I almost feel like in this movie it's like a frat boy, but not in the way that we think of frat boys, like in the way in the 50s where it was always like, oh, look at this, it's my good old friend, that I was in a frat with. Like he has this very frat boy persona in this, like the 40s and 50s style of that, like college good old boy kind of thing going on, and this other guy is just wringing his hands and walking in circles and saying like, you can't even get shot by a woman anymore, or clean your gun, and everyone in town's talking, and he's like, what, like you, like to keep it down, pretty much.
Settle down. Yeah exactly. Yeah, and you're right, he's a kind of a he's tough, he's muscle, he's sent out to do dirty work, and that includes killing people, but he has a very light voice for such a big guy. So they're clearly playing, and the director Tourneur is clearly playing with his mixture of qualities, and the sense that he's just a hey you who's told he's attached to Witt, and Witt tells him what to do. So,
but like attached to it in such a I almost, like, I don't want to say like romantic, but like there's something masculine and feminine about their relationship.
Exactly.
Where it's he feels attached the way like like kind of a high strung girlfriend would be attached. And in that scene where it's the four of them, it's Jack Fisher, the guy that gets shot, it's Robert Mitchum, who's just laconically laying there and not even really opening his eyes, and it's like they have this great dialogue between them where Kirk Douglas is sitting on one side, and then Robert Mitchum sitting like this with his eyes closed, essentially listening to the story. It's just like he's asleep, and the other guy's pacing. And then at one point, the Jack Fisher character breaks into the thing, and nobody even remembers that he's there. So it's in that dynamic, you get all of these characters having this having the dynamic that will follow them throughout the entire thing, because Jane Greer doesn't even notice that the Jack Fisher character is following her to this place, and the entire movie, Robert Mitchum's kind of superpower is that he's capable of listening to what everybody's saying and kind of processing it in real time and getting to the bottom of all these plots that people are hatching against him.
And he's also got great worker sensibilities in this film. So when he's assigned to do something, he's going to have to steal tax files off the lawyer, Witt's lawyer. It's a convoluted, very typical film noir plot that's made deliberately hard for you to follow.
I've loved that Leonard Eels is the lawyer, and I don't know, something about that name.
That's a great name, Leonard Eels. But it's all run through the secretary. And as soon as you meet his secretary, she's gorgeous. She's Arlene Dahl, early performance. And here's another femme fatale in training. Here's like grabs her and says, "I'm coming out of this alive," and she said, "You've got nice strong hands."
But it's this thing where you can sense this other. It's almost like she's the femme fatale in this Leonard Eel guy's story.
Absolutely. She's clearly setting him up to be killed. Yes. She's clearly being paid off, or something's happening to work with Witt to set him up to be killed. But anyway, when he gets there, he knows a cab driver. So like he's old buddies with this cab driver who's then going to just be there to run him all around and help him, and it's just like this kind of worker solidarity thing that you get a lot of times in Mitchum parts. Let me see. Is there more? There's lots more plot of how he outfoxes them, double crosses them, gets to the body of Leonard Eels, who's just been killed. Later he'll say, "Oh, so this was the plot." He recounts what the plot was, and it's helpful for us as well as for the bad guys he's talking to. So I was supposed to go up there, have a drink with Leonard Eels, and the secretary leave my fingerprints all over the place. So I was clearly the fall guy who was supposed to have killed the guy, but then I took the body and hid it. So now where are we,
there's a
guys?
briefcase. So for the rest of the
Yes,
movie,
and he's got the documents, the tax
yeah, it does the
documents.
same kind of almost Kiss Me Deadly thing where it's like it's kind of a MacGuffin throughout the rest of the movie. It's like there's this briefcase that everyone keeps referencing, but
Oops, yes.
I mean, really, he kind of is going to have to kill his way to the, or somebody's going to have to kill their way to the end of this because
to the end. Yes.
nobody's
and of course
going to
he's
ever
got to
stop.
negotiate his own feelings for Kathy.
Yeah,
at a certain
and
point,
then like hopefully he has to get back in one piece, which obviously he doesn't, but he has to get back in one piece to this other girl that he's just told his life story to, that's enamored with him. That
who says you've got to know, you got to make up your mind. Are you with her? Are you with me? Make sure you know. And that's going to be the tantalizing aspect of the film, because in the end, at least I always feel we don't know. He seems to loathe Kathy. He has one great put down line after another. She's like trying to apologize all this fakey way for him. Now he sees through her and he's just like, shut up, get out of here. He's in the bedroom where he's staying at I have to sleep in this room. Or,
she
Kathy,
says,
you're wonderful.
She says, did you miss me? And he says, no more than I would my eyes.
My eyes. Yeah, that's early when he still loves her. Yeah. Later he's saying, oh, Kathy, you're wonderful. You're like a leaf that blows from one gutter to another. So he's just got these cutting lines that are all about how he now loathes her and sees who she is, how duplicitous, how evil, blah, blah, blah. But they're also constantly drawn together, and you don't know. Is he getting drawn back to Kathy for real? Is he just playing her game for a while to outfox her? It is left an open question right up to the end, when, of course, we're obviously telling you the whole story. So if you want to see it without spoilers, it's kind of too late. He's going to basically sacrifice himself, it seems, to take her down. She's going to realize he's driving her right into a police road trap. She realizes she shoots him, he crashes the car, and they die together in a kind of classic amour fou kind of ending. And in the end, the nice blonde girl goes to the deaf boy and says, was he leaving with Kathy? And the boy nods as if to say, yes, he was completely back with Kathy.
But still, in that moment, you don't know whether he's kind of been told to say that to
exactly.
This
is so at least what you suspect.
Which always in these movies, I've noticed, it also happens in Thunder Road. There's this thing where the nice girl also has this guy that's kind of following her around.
The nice stalwart guy who's boring, but who's there. Yes,
she has no interest in that guy, but you could tell that if Robert Mitchum was to get bumped off, she'd obviously have to get with that guy.
And Robert Mitchum is regarded as, even though people don't know exactly what his mystery is, he's regarded as a suspicious character. And so her family hates having him come around. And this guy finally has a confrontation, the boring guy, with Robert Mitchum's character.
He's bored of that guy. Even like the guy's like, I would have killed you. And he's like, well, I don't know, man. Do it if you're going to do it.
I mean, whatever. But there's also the possibility he feels guilty enough that he is probably going to ruin her life. He seems to be badly fated. So yes, did he work it out with the deaf kid to say that? Did the deaf kid know he would want him to, or was he really, going away with Kathy? And so you're just left with the question that you have to decide for yourself.
Yeah, it's even there's even like a question: did he set up the cops to be on that part of the road?
Exactly, which I always assumed he did.
Yeah, I did too. But there's there's questions about that, because you never actually see him contact the police to be like, but they're in the middle of that road, and it's like, where else, how else?
And he always has a plan. Once he realizes the kind of jam he's in, seems like he's always plotting as fast as they are, how he's going to ruin them. So it could be he hoped to get away with it.
Seconds before they hit this point, she just in this rate, because she's just drawn by id the entire movie. Kathy Moffat, she realizes that she's been set up by Robert Mitchum, I think that is why I always assumed that it was him that set the whole thing up with the cops on the road.
Yeah, she clearly thinks he set her up. Yes.
Without even thinking, hey, this is the guy that's driving. She shoots him. And then she's trying to grab the steering wheel, and the cops shoot her. But in this moment, you can see there's an impulsiveness to her character where it's the exact opposite of a character like Robert Mitchum that, throughout this entire movie, kind of thinks everything through. She's not thinking anything through.
Well, and she goes for a gun first rather than last.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, if she's really had it. Yeah, and there are wonderful lines that also make you think he really does. No one can compare to Kathy as bad as she is. There's a beautiful line when he's working the dead end jobs, and he says something like, "I worked the lowest jobs, but I didn't care because I had her." And then there's this ecstatic scene, love scene that of course they pan away from, but the wind is blowing and they've been caught in the rain and they're laughing and he towels off her hair and you're just like, they play it really beautifully. Really convinces you there's a kind of peak exhilaration that exists between the two of them that he's never going to be able to find again. And the bitterness is knowing that you had that peak experience with this woman who apparently is rotten to the core and would betray you for a nickel. So what is he going to do about that? He does wind up saying toward the end, when it looks like she's got the upper hand and he's going to have to go with her, and he says, we deserve each other. His evaluation of himself is, I am also rotten, at least rotten enough that I would be stuck with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, throughout the movie, he makes a lot of decisions where you can make that case. It's like, he keeps getting drawn back into this life. It's never
Yes.
This life is never going to leave him completely, even if he like desperately wants it to be so.
Yeah, it's part of the doom, and part of a sense, again, it's just part of the physical way he is in the world, that he seems already, when we first meet him, at his most innocent, he's so not innocent. You feel like he's dragging bad baggage with him. He's a partner of this guy he despises. That's very Bogart too, right out of Sam Spade and the Maltese Falcon. This guy, he's just like, I hate this guy, and you can see
when somebody kills your partner, you're supposed to do something,
even if you didn't like it, which he definitely didn't. And he was, in Sam Spade was sleeping with the guy's wife. There's this kind of like, you've got certain moral principles you stick to. That's the Sam Spades thing. And everything else, you're just doing the dirty as much as any of the worst people you're dealing with. And it's a real referendum on humanity. There are very few innocents in the world of film noir. And usually it's a very bad thing to be innocent, because you're probably going to get killed or something bad's going to happen to you. So it's very much a genre about a fallen world, and which is so interesting because it's happening. It's coming to popularity, especially in the immediate post-war world and through the 50s, when America is at its most like triumphal point. We're now the new superpower. We come out these hero victors after the war. We come out fabulously rich with a roaring economy, while European countries are just absolutely mired in poverty, and the war wasn't, other than Pearl Harbor, wasn't fought on our soil. So while all these other genres are shiny and materialistic and happy times and big musicals, here you've got film noir going, everything has gone horribly wrong at some point.
Yeah.
And it's all bad. The world is a bad place, and people are bad.
There's a sense of underneath the surface. There's whatever's happening under the surface, and the kind of the criminal world, the criminal underworld. There's always an underworld to the society that we've built. That's kind of it's the last time that America really feels like it's a hero in the world, right? Like, think about all the wars we fought after that. It's Korea, Vietnam. Like Iraq, like Africa, or then Iraq again. Like, it's the last time we really picked on somebody our own size, and it's the last time we really feel like we've defeated true
evil, unequivocally
right?
evil, terrible. There's no. That's why they call it the good war, because you could come out of that war, even though we did horrible things too. Oh my God! But we could still come out saying they were worse, and that we had to stop them. Okay. So yes, and that mood really infects all the other genres, all of, what's going on in Hollywood, other than film noir, which is like the guilty conscience of America. And it's fascinating for that reason. I mean, even if you have cop presences, which eventually the censors just make them do. So in the 50s movies, you'll get all these tributes this is a movie all about the glories of the NYPD or the FBI, and you sort of frame a really dark sort of story of a kind of underworld. But for a lot of them, if there are cops or governmental figures or whatever, they're bad too. There's a kind of leaking rottenness in this world. And to find anyone with virtue is to be amazed. So, like, if you see The Big Sleep, there's a scene where a little criminal loves this woman. She's rotten to the core. The little criminal's name is Harry Jones, played by Elijah Cook Jr. And he takes poison to avoid betraying. They're going to beat it out of him, these other thugs, his girlfriend's name, even though she's not worth it. And this is witnessed by, the Philip Marlowe character, played by Humphrey Bogart, who's listening in. And in the end, he sits over the dead body of little Harry Jones and says, "You done good." It's a rare tribute to someone who was actually brave and selfless, even though it was dumb. She's a terrible woman. It wasn't worth dying over. But still, it represented real feeling in a world that has very little real love and real bravery. And so every time you get these little mini tributes in film noir to like, wow, someone's nice, someone's brave, someone's a little bit good here, but it's very much the exception. You're constantly revealing a kind of rotten soul, and
the people that are nice, I mean, they do like it's always they've either taken poison or they've, like it's always something that they're very quickly dispatched with. Anybody
or they're just gonna, you'll think what's gonna happen to that poor deaf boy who worked at the gas station. No one was on his side but Jeff Bailey. This town seems a little bit cruel, not that nice, and he had this little haven, and now what's gonna happen?
The only people who really ever encounter from the town are the very gossipy
the diner woman at the diner.
He's like, oh, well, I'll tell you all about it. And there's this guy she's never even met, the Joe character, this the heavy for Kirk Douglas, like his second in command. She's automatically spilling all the gossip in the town to this guy who's not even from the town, is clearly not from the town.
Exactly.
From Tahoe.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a portrait of a lovely town. The nicest person in the town is apparently the extremely naive blonde, young woman who's wildly in love with
along the other guy. That's
Yeah. So that's very typical. So again, in so many ways, Out of the Past stands for film noir, and it really is a perfect showcase of the Mitchum star persona that it's gonna be a remarkably flexible one in that he can carry it more places than you'd think. He can't play an absolute naif. I'm trying to think of any time he really plays someone who's naive, and I don't think he can ever do that. He plays different characters.
So the El Dorado is the time that he, at least for parts of it, where I was just watching.
Is he naive and innocent? I thought he's
not necessarily innocent, but
he's a victim character.
He falls for this girl that comes to town, and he's completely smitten with her.
Oh yes,
and because of that, he climbs into a bottle, and he doesn't get out of the bottle for the next.
Certainly romantically vulnerable. That is true.
Yeah.
Yes.
But like all the other characters make sure. I mean, because it's Robert Mitchum, all the other characters make sure to say like, this is clearly a girl that was no good for him, but she left him for this other guy as soon as the drummer came to town. But which I don't know, like it's funny because it's such a tiny little town, and it's like I guess a big drummer came through, but it's but in that movie, I think his thing is that he was naive in that moment, and that's also one of his more restrained performances.
Yeah, though he does he's obviously he knows all about drinking and hangover because he plays an alcoholic wreck, maybe better than anyone has ever played an alcoholic wreck. Even in the scene where
I couldn't stop thinking about because this is clearly what it was based on. Blazing Saddles with the Gene Wilder character.
Oh yeah, the Gene Wilder character is the shivering drunk. Yeah, no, because even in the scene where he confronts the guys who've been making fun of him, the bad guys who are running the town. John Wayne is the one his friend is supporting him through this period of kind of regaining his authority. He's supposed to be the sheriff over this town, but he's a joke. Yeah. He's a useless drunk. If John Wayne hadn't busted in the middle of it, he's doing it so weakly and waveringly, clutching his gun. But he's so uncertain that if Wayne hadn't come through in the back to say, I'm backing you up, you feel like he'd never have gotten through his scene of confrontation. So that's how much of a shaky wreck Mitchum makes him. It's really well done.
But like throughout his performances, there's always these small timelines. Like you're talking about like the 3 years between Jeff Markham becoming Jeff Bailey. In El Dorado, it's like I think it's 8 months in between when John Wayne leaves and goes to the thing, and he finds out that these guys are coming back to kill him in this town, and he has to go save his friend. You find out it's like 2 months ago that he'd climbed into a bottle, so he's become a full-blown alcoholic in a matter of months.
Right. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. That's right. Of course, we're talking about El Dorado, the Western. It's a Howard Hawks Western. Probably the second genre that he worked in the most. And it's where he first started. When he was first getting, acting roles, he's getting them in tiny roles in Hopalong Cassidy Western, B Westerns and stuff. So he makes a ton of them. But even once he's famous, he returns repeatedly. And he's also a major figure in what's called a film genre called Western noir, which really at the same time as noir starts becoming a strange crossover. Very strange crossover. Film
Yeah.
noir is urban, indoor oriented, or back alley, labyrinthian, all about these dark, irredeemable characters, et cetera, et cetera. There's no moral code that you can trust, all those things. And the Western is, outdoor, bucolic. It's ultimately usually going to affirm American values, at least the classic Western. And you start getting this strange melding of the two. And Robert Mitchum is absolutely at the crosshairs of those films. So, because I taught a class on Western noir, we spent a lot of time on Mitchum because Mitchum somehow could be in both genres in many, many times. So he's like in Pursuit.
Thunder Road is a good cross between the two of them, kind of.
Yes.
It's this classic crime film where, he's a runner of moonshine in Tennessee, and he hears a story about apparently this really happening, or it's a tall tale from Tennessee at this time where these guys were being chased by the it's not the ATF back then, it's the IRS's alcohol and firearms department, which is it's very funny to think of, like, these guys being like armed IRS agents going around, or Treasury Department agents going around to try to shoot these guys on the side of the road. But that is kind of a great because he's both in Tennessee in this like in this kind of small rural town, but also a lot of that movie takes place in the big city, and the big city boss coming in to try to muscle these people out of the Harlan County, but not that Harlan County. It's a different Harlan County.
Harlan County, yeah. Yeah, and it's it's the kind of rough outdoor, but with Mitchum brings a lot of his noir persona to it. He's a kind of fated guy who seems almost to have a death wish in the way he's driving toward, he's caught between rivals. There's a gang trying to take over the what do you call it? Bootlegging business with stills out in the country, but there's also the feds are after him, and he's caught between warring forces, and he's determined.
It's this early kind of consolidation story where the big company wants to consolidate all these small rural communities that have all these stills that run their own moonshine, and wants to consolidate them into one big kind of moonshine conglomerate. Which is something that I think starting in the 70s, you'd see a lot with these movies where people were kind of grappling with big corporations and trying to tell stories that way, but how big corporations have kind of incorporated the things that would be criminal before into their systems. Like, I mean, a more modern version of it is obviously in Fargo, where the whole story takes place, or not the TV show Fargo, like the second season or whatever, where the whole thing takes place as the trucking business. At the end of it, the guy is kind of just put into a corporate office after he's done all this stuff where he's kind of blown everybody away, and he makes it out in the end, and then they put him in a little tiny office in like a corporate building, and he's now like the second suite kind of the management in this big company, and it's like he's miserable in that world.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And it is amazing when you think of just the sheer length of Mitchum's career and how his star persona was sufficiently varied that he could bring it from decade to decade to decade and still stay in kind of top roles. It's such a strange. I just watched, because I knew you had watched it, The Friends of Eddie Coyle. I'd always meant to see it, and I finally did. And he brings so many of the old Mitchum qualities, but to a kind of deliberately diminished, small time Irish mafia guy in Boston, who's going to wind up ratting out people just to survive financially, but then getting out-ratted by the only guy who really seems like he's maybe his friend. Ironically,
the entire thing is based on Whitey Bulger.
Well, Whitey Bulger, who was the betraying friend, the bartender guy who was working really an informant, feeding the government.
Played by Peter Boyle, who I love that there's an entire the 70s, the 80s. You just kind of put Peter Boyle in anything. Like,
I know he's everywhere.
Like that movie Joe or whatever, where it's like the reactionary guy that
the candidate. I know he's a wonderful actor, and it was really his era. Yeah.
Yeah, but in this, he's kind of he's the bartender that's snitching to the same guy, and by that point, it is the ATF. It's no longer. I think that's why that stood out to me, that in Thunder Road, where they're talking to the guy it's the alcohol and firearms division of the Treasury Department. So it's kind of like the IRS guys that are like armed IRS guys, and then by the time it's Friends of Eddie Coyle, they're actually in the ATF, and he's ratting to the ATF about where his guns are coming from.
Yeah, but it's such an interesting drama in that it takes a if you watch a lot of Mitchum movies, you naturally think he's always kind of savvy and he's always working the angles, and if he has to sell someone out, he will, and he has to figure it out, he will. And so there's a long protracted scene in the end where Peter Boyle is basically arranging a hit on Eddie Coyle, and I just sat there going, well, of course he must realize it and he's going to do something, and he doesn't. Again, too late, spoiler alert. He doesn't. He literally gets way drunk at this hockey game they're going to. Bobby Orr is playing.
It's a real Boston Bruins game.
It's a real Boston Bruins game. Yeah. And he's like, for once, he's actually out with a friend. For the friends of Eddie Coyle, there's not a lot of friends, really. Yeah,
there's one, but it's the guy that ends up blowing his brains out.
It was the biggest betrayer. And so, yes, he's got a plot. We know he does. And I keep thinking, well, Mitchum must know. And then there's no evidence. And then, no, he passes out in the car where Boyle and a young henchman are going to kill him, and they kill him. And I was just like, that is so 70s, that movie. Man, that's so 70s movie. In the end, it's the most downbeat, and it's got that slow pace, like everybody is smoking marijuana constantly. It's just like the sleepiest, slowest, quaalude-taken pace of a movie ever. And in the end, again, it's just this final reckoning between
everybody in that movie sits in cars for the long.
They all sit in cars. There's long conversations at bars, etc. Yeah. Long. People are trying to bring out their mob wisdom, including Eddie Coyle is constantly trying to lecture people on what he knows as a mafia guy, old-time mafia guy, small-time mafia guy. But anyway,
he's actually a shock. He's in his 60s, I think, in Eddie Coyle, and he's completely wrung out. But he's he's in his 60s or 70s. It's supposed to be in this movie, and he still has not made it anywhere in this mafia world. He's just he's just a guy that runs guns.
And he says he's still sweating, having to pay the plumber. He's like nowhere. As far as money, and he's trying to get to the usual, a couple of decent paydays or even one decent payday. So he can be the one who finally gets to go to Florida or wherever that other people make it and he never makes it. But to have him be that much of a kind of sad sack who's never going to be able to work it out, and he's going to sell himself out in every way, every principle, everything he ever wanted to stand for. He has to do all the rotten, dirty work and it's all for nothing. And for some punk cop that you keep thinking, he's going to have a confrontation with that young guy and just kill him. But that's old Mitchum. That's not the Eddie Coyle. And, it does seem like Mitchum really dedicated himself to this part. Sometimes he doesn't, especially later in his career. You can almost see when he's just mentally turned himself off and it's just like, it's a payday.
You can go through the, I mean, sometimes I do this just to check, but the Rotten Tomatoes kind of thing where it's like, you can see, kind of gauge how each film was received. And I think after Friends of Eddie Coyle, it kind of, it's a downslide.
Oh yeah. And that movie does terribly. The critics like it, but it doesn't do well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, a lot of them don't do well. He's got a lot of, but then, but he has again, if you look at the whole long career, I think at a certain point he loses interest. He's this man of intense interests. He's a guy who's a professional boxer for a while. He's raising quarter horses for a while. He's way into music and cutting albums, including famously a calypso album, in which he does attempts the Jamaican Trinidadian accent and slang and the whole thing. It's very odd. He sings a lot in a number of his films. He's producing films for a short while, though most of them don't do that well. So and then he literally will get bored and just be like, and just leave off. Yeah. So that's part of the kind of quality of his life, of intense investments and getting bored. And he almost develops, not as bad as Brando, but in the ballpark of Brando. If he admired the director, if he liked the script, if he dedicated himself to the project, brilliant. But there were times when he just clearly was just like, I don't care. I'm indifferent to this. So it's my living, that kind of thing. And he liked to brag up that aspect of himself. So he was always in interviews, almost always representing himself as someone who didn't care, who thought acting was super ridiculously easy. Apparently he had a photographic memory. He didn't even have to sweat memorizing scripts. And he was just like, look, it was the kind of Spencer Tracy, learn your lines, don't bump into the furniture kind of attitude of like, it's no biggie. And hearing some people rave about me doing great performances is just bull. I walk around, they photograph me, I'm done. I take my check, I go home. But then there are many, many directors who worked with him who are like, oh, it's such a bunch of bull.
Yeah.
He's actually super hardworking, a super brilliant actor, super sensitive man.
Well,
Really
it's
smart.
Jane Greer has a quote: "Bob would never be caught acting; he just is."
He just is, and the he just is. That's also who else says it? Someone else says, "Oh, David Lean." Other actors act. Mitchum is. He just seemed able to be on screen. Again, that was the Tourneur thing. He just loved people who could just exist on screen. They're not saying lines. They're not doing action, and you can't take your eyes off them for whatever they're doing, which is almost nothing.
Howard
So
Hawks also called him a fraud for saying because he pretends not to care about acting. He says
yeah,
he cares about acting.
he totally cares
He's
about
lying.
acting. He
He's
works
lying.
really hard. Yeah, exactly. So you get these complicated quality, like depending on again which Mitchum you're getting, you're gonna people come away with totally different ideas. For some he's crass, he's crude, he's rude, he's mean, he's this, is that. Others, what a gentleman, so sensitive, so gracious to everyone. He's a lovely man. It all depends on who's reporting on him. But a number of directors: William Wellman, Jacques Tourneur, Vincent Minnelli, Charles Laughton, John Huston, David Lean, all attested to, wow, what a great actor. And it's so touching with Night of the Hunter, the way he just dedicates himself to realizing Charles Laughton's visions. And of all the two people in the world in movies that you'd never put together that would see eye to eye, I would pick Robert Mitchum and Charles Laughton. But apparently they were very, very tight, and Mitchum got 100% on board with this project that when it comes out in 1955 is going to be badly reviewed, is going to make no money, and is going to so wreck Laughton's reputation as a director right out of the gate. It's his first and his last film. He's never going to get to make another film, which is tragic because, of course, over the years, it's become this cult classic, much beloved. And it's a unique American film, a great film.
Yeah, he has this long-standing friendship with James Agee,
Yeah.
who is like one of his Robert Mitchum's best friends, the writer, who is actually the one that he did The African Queen, but Night of the Hunter is kind of a screenplay that I guess is very disputed by Ilsa Lancaster. How much?
Well, and then he wrote it. He wrote it, but supposedly Laughton hated it and rewrote the whole thing. So.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
and talk about
Mitchum wanted to play it straight, like exactly kind of the character from like the book that was written there, and Charles Laughton says we can't do that, like that we can't do that. That cannot appear on screen because the character as written would have been so absolutely terrifying that he's like, look, we're trying to kind of go for an audience. Like he said, this is like a great quote. He's like, if we play it straight, mothers are going to grip their children and pull them closer to you when they see you on the street, or pull them closer to them when they'll never let you walk by their children again.
Right. Well, and Laughton also had a vision. He wanted it to be a kind of child's eye, imaginative sense of the world and of the Mitchum character. So Mitchum is playing an outsized, terrifying figure that can fit into a child's imagination. Not in every scene. In some scenes, he's playing it straighter than others, but it's so much of it is filtered through the eyes of the lead boy, who's the main one experiencing this and the main one terrorized by the Harry Powell character. That's the Robert Mitchum, the killer preacher character. He's been murdering widows for their money. I mean, not widows, like older women for their money. Some widows, I guess. And he's on a spree of doing this, and he shows up in town. And of course, he sets his sights on this boy's mother, played by Shelley Winters, in one of her greatest performances. Laughton is to be commended. He really got a great performance out of her.
We kind of talked about this exact thing with Cape Fear, and kind of the fact that you can kind of replace the like the Max Cady character in both versions with like a person of color, and kind of the story, I mean, obviously would take on a far more I guess vivid and brutal like personification of a person like that's seen as this kind of relentless sociopathic person because of our fear of crime. Another example is Night of the Hunter, and Spike Lee actually taking the scene HATE, and putting those, he puts it onto the radio character, because he's making a point about how the black man is seen as this kind of relentless kind of psychopathic personage personality in our culture, and he makes that point by replacing that scene with the radio character who gets killed at the end.
Right. Oh, yes. So yes, and yeah. In other words, Harry Powell, if you don't know, though it's very, very famous, is walking around with his knuckles tattooed with love and hate. He has a religious parable he's made up himself. The story, the tale of love and
Yeah.
hate that he enacts, and it's completely terrifying
Like it
because
was with this hand that that
the,
there's a, yeah, that
Cain struck
Abel,
his brother
yeah,
low, and
yeah.
yeah. He does a whole sing song riff.
The tale of
Um,
right hand, left hand.
yeah, this tale of
But
right
there
and
but
left.
there is that thing where it's, these characters is kind of people that are seen as these relentless kind of psychopathic characters. I think a lot of when they're making points about how we as a culture see people of color,
Right, I got
a
it.
lot of times, yeah,
They're ultimate figures of menace, irrational figures of
yeah,
menace. And of course, Harry Powell is both. He's both a kind of literal, realistically drawn figure. He's based on a real guy in real life who was,
yeah,
killing women for their money, um, charming them into marriage and then murdering them. But he's also got scenes, especially when he's dealing with the children, and of course he has a one word, like in Cape Fear, he has a one word delivery that you just strikes terror into your heart, which is children, and
yeah,
he will call them as if he's their fond father after he's married and murdered their mother because he knows the children have this money. He was in jail with their father, and from the father robbed a bank, and it's where's the money, and he zeroes in on the kids must know, and so he's going to kill the kids, and they have to escape. So there are scenes like where his shadow stretches out with his arms 10 feet long when he's chasing them, or he'll howl like an animal, or
yeah.
he
It
rides along
is
the horizon.
otherworldly, animalistic. Like there's sounds that Robert Mitchum's able to make in
Yes.
that in Night of the Hunter that I didn't even like. I've never even heard a human being make
Yes,
before.
exactly. He finds these inhuman howls and crazy groans and moans that are just like, wow. Are
When he
terrifying.
finally gets shot in the face with the bird pellet from the shotgun and he's blinded by it,
Mhm,
which also has its own like religious connotations.
mhm,
He runs into the thing and he goes, "Woo, woo, 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 woo," but
mhm,
like the way that an animal like would
mhm.
like a wounded animal would if you if you shot
Yes,
them. Yeah.
if you shot them, yeah. It's another of the performances that really show how Mitchum can delve into almost all regional American kind of folk-like qualities. I mean, his family was very here, there, and everywhere. He's born in Connecticut. They spend time in Delaware. He goes with, they're moving around chasing work. He's in South Carolina with certain relatives. I don't know, he's in the Georgia, the chain gang in Georgia. He's a hobo riding the rails. He moves west to California with a sister who's gotten interested. She's in theater in a small way. He follows her out. He does a little theater. He winds up one of the great stories of Mitchum as kind of hard old America is he's working in California at Lockheed Martin, and it's the work conditions are so dangerous and so terrible. This is clearly pre a lot of regulation, and it's all about sheet metal, and you had to be quickly replacing sheets in a machine, and they would come shooting out, and if you weren't controlling them, they would fly out, and they were literally like maiming and crippling people. It was horribly dangerous, and he developed insomnia from having to work. He's married. He has a pregnant. I think he's pregnant or a wife with young children. Dorothy's had kids already, maybe, and he has to work. They have no money. I think at one point they were living in a converted chicken coop. They had nothing, and he becomes so terrified and so unable to function. He becomes hysteric. He develops hysterical blindness. He's gone blind. He goes to a doctor and says, "Doctor, I'm blind." The doctor examines him and says, "There's nothing physically wrong with you." And Robert Mitchum's like, "I'm blind. How can there?" He doesn't even understand. He's like, "Look, I think you're so terrified of going to work and that you're gonna have to quit that job." And he's like, "I can't quit. I've got a wife and kids." And the doctor's like, "Well, you're gonna be blind." So that's how he gets into acting. At least that's one of his stories. And but he did work at Lockheed Aircraft, and that's how he winds up, picking up extra work, working on Hopalong Cassidy movies. And the next he moves into, so it's all a kind of happenstance of someone who's trying to make it in all sorts of different sections of American culture. And I think that really helps him seem believable in such a variety of very intensely regional roles. Like in Home from the Hill, I think he's in Texas. Yeah, he is. He's definitely in Texas. He's a Texas patriarch. He can keep moving around and without doing too extravagant accents, he can convey a kind of hard old America sense that is actually kind of goes along with his actual biography. So that's a fascinating point for me because a lot of actors can't do that.
Yeah, we were talking about kind of his Bogart kind of style with
Mm,
out of the past. One of the first roles that he has in theater when he's
mm,
doing that small period, he's in the play, like the stage play of the
yeah,
Petrified Forest, and he
right.
plays the Duke Manty role that
Yeah.
Bogart would the
Mm,
Bogart role in the Petrified Forest on stage in Long
mm,
Beach. And that's like one of his early kind of things where people kind of discover like, oh,
yeah.
this kid is this because he's in one of the first things he joins like an actors guild
Mhm.
in Long Beach because his sister's in it. And there's a great quote from his brother where he's like, the brother says that the sister said, "Hey, join our our
Mm.
theater guild," and both him and his brother are like, "No, no, that's kind of like that's what they're like. There's 60 women and we only have 4 men," and they both join
Oh,
it instantaneously.
whole other story.
Yeah,
Yes, exactly. And it's true that it's a little disappointing that Mitchum, he just had a macho side. That was not unusual for his era at all. And so he in a lot of interviews he would express that uneasiness that was very typical for his time, for men of his time about being an actor. And he'd say it's something like it's a silly way to make a living. You're putting on makeup, you're putting on
I mean, it's still
costumes.
we still have that. It's just it's kind of morphed. Now it's not as much gendered as it is like people have this sense that being an actor is kind of fake. Like I really hate
Mm,
this when people express this, but people express this all the time. It's like, oh, these are
mhm.
kind of fake people. And
Yeah,
because they're it's like almost like actors are lying to you on stage, and it's like
right, right, exactly. There's too
it fits in with
simplicity
all of
in
the
being able to
yeah.
yeah,
It fits in with the sense that everything's kind of a scam in the world and everything's kind of fake. And it's like, what's more fake, I guess, than putting yourself
yeah,
into a different person's shoes. But I mean, it also comes to the death of empathy in our society. So
yeah.
it's like,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
yeah,
And, that was the other side, the less expressed publicly side of Mitchum, which was he was actually way into his craft, but he didn't like anyone being
yeah.
pretentious or prancing about their, artistry. That also very typical of his time.
There's already
Um,
a like I guess a distinguishing thing between kind of what we now would refer to as method acting, but
mhm,
and what Mitchum was doing, which is film acting, and so there's already kind of this distaste among some actors for this
yeah.
the we don't really we've kind of really vulgarized what method acting means. It's not like this thing that
Well, method acting vulgarized Stanislavski's theories of
yeah,
acting, so there's been
but
a
they're talking
whole
about how
descent.
people kind of walk around in the shoes of their character and think like them and speak like them, and they're like, "Yeah,
You can't
Robert
play
Mitchum was."
someone who's been in jail unless you go to jail. You can't,
Yeah.
that was the worst of it. That was the dumbest of it, yeah.
But
Mhm,
they're like, Robert Mitchum isn't that kind of actor. He just steps right into the role rather than being
mhm.
someone who has to walk around and kind of, uh, get into the person's headspace and think their thoughts and speak their language and,
But
you
he
know
also had, again, we've already said many times, vast and varied life experiences most of us never have.
Yeah.
And a really complex, varied character with all sorts of contradictions in him so that he could go in almost any direction. So it's not like he always played tough, even though that came very naturally, obviously, to him. But, he plays the cuckolded schoolmaster in Ryan's Daughter, who nevertheless loves his wife so much that he won't give her up, won't join the community in condemning her. He plays an artist, trying to be cynical artist who, again, it's a film noir, The Locket. It's really great. This is when it's a smaller part. He isn't full star yet. But he's this artist who wants to be cynical, but then meets what appears to be a really sweet young woman, and then finds out she's a liar and a thief and maybe a murderer and all of these other things, and winds up killing himself. He had the ability to move in a variety of he's wonderful as the aging um, itinerant sheep ranch worker in the Sundowners, where he drinks too much. He's a little bit feckless as a father. He's dragged his family all over us, the Australian outback. Deborah Carr plays his wife. It's a wonderful and unusual film. He's hilarious in certain scenes because he's aging. He's got a son who's on the cusp of manhood, and he's struggling to go on being as tough as he always was. He drinks. He's very funny in some scenes, and other scenes his behavior is kind of shocking. He can really run the gamut, and he does wonderfully tender scene work. I think one of the appeals to women, both on screen and in life, is that not only does he have this kind of enticing wild man erotic quality about him, he has a certain sweetness and tenderness that can come out that is so surprising given his persona. There's a movie called The Red Pony, which hardly ever runs anymore. It's kind of a children's movie with a kid lead, but like so many of the movies that were like that in the 40s and 50s, it's so hardcore it will scar you for life. I saw it as a kid.
Yeah.
So the pony that he raises with the ranch hand, which is Robert Mitchum, this boy, winds up getting sick and somehow breaking out of the stall and dying in a ravine. And the vultures come and are eating. You don't see the shot, but you see the kid's face when he finds the pony. And the ranch hand, played by Robert Mitchum, comes in. The kid collapses and he picks up the kid and carries him back. And I can still vividly see it in my mind. Because Robert Mitchum's character feels so terrible that he just doesn't even know what to do. And he's just striding to bring the kid back home. And you could just see it all over his body that he just is almost coming apart himself because he just doesn't know what to do for this boy. Robert Mitchum was a beautiful actor physically in that he could convey complexities through the way he walked and moved through the world. Really effective. And, with women, he has wonderful scenes with women where there's just such sweetness. I mean, when he's with the young woman who's too naive and young for him and out of the past, it's a perfect example. And apparently it was being replicated in real life. I forget the name of the actress. I think it was Virginia Houston, something like that. She had a mad crush on him. And he did not go for it, shall we say, presumably because she's just too young and too...
Yeah.
And
Virginia Houston. There's that great line that he says to there's this great line in that scene where he's like she's like, where you've been to all these great places or whatever. And then she's like, where is your favorite place? And he's like, right here, right now, or whatever. She's like, I bet you say that to all the places.
Oh yes, she has a good line there. Yeah. And she'll just be like saying dreamy romantic things. They say when you die, your name is written on a cloud. And he's like, who says? In this sweet way, like a 5-year-old. It's really adorable. So he really conveys that he loves her and he can envision another life. It would be bucolic. It would be he plans the little house they would build, but it has a quality of fantasy about it. Like, could he ever really be honest with her and tell her? He's going to wind up having to tell her. But he clearly doesn't want to. He would like to recover some of his innocence through her. And he conveys all this in a fairly short scene. She doesn't have a lot of scenes. So he tended to be able to do this kind of heart-touching work with children. He's wonderful with children. He's the one who gets the children in Night of the Hunter through the experience because he coaches them because for some reason Charles Laughton could not deal with children.
He didn't. It wasn't
children.
Yeah.
And so he just couldn't direct them. And also Robert Mitchum just quietly stepped in and directed them. He just has an amazing and always surprising sweetness and charm that can just emerge. And that seems to have been part of his life. Again, you get those kind of mixed accounts of who he really is behind the scenes. Yeah. And he's in so many genres, which is rare too, so he comes to, he's probably definitely a star-making role is the story of G.I. Joe, which was supposedly so touching. He plays a sergeant who's, that's always the most touching character in American movies, the sergeant, because he's the one who's overseeing the men, but at a close level, and he's not one of those full officers who are removed. And so it's having a huge impact on him, the men who are dying, etc., under his command. And, apparently there were soldiers who said he's the only one, and he hadn't served. I mean, he literally hadn't even done his medic service yet. And they just said it's like he understands us, he sees us, he gets us. This is the authentic portrait. Supposedly William Wellman, who had served in the military, the director, was in tears almost watching.
Yeah, and it was his screen test. He did a screen test for the story of G.I. Joe.
And wound up using it, right? Because it was so
they
good.
ended up using it in the movie, but he was tearing up during the screen test, and he was like, and then of course in that self-deprecating way that Robert Mitchum kind of always had, he's like, I don't know if it was because the scene was so bad.
Yeah, he would say something like that. Yeah. Yes. But this is how he gets to be a star. He's literally getting noticed by one director after another, who's then recommending him to us. And these roles are growing and growing and growing, and that's how that all happens. Is that there are directors throughout who are recognizing, and he's so much the man of the hour. I mean, there's film noir just as he's emerging into stardom. film
Yeah.
noir is on the rise, his perfect genre. But he did a lot of dramas, romantic dramas. He did thrillers and suspense. He did the hard to classify. Thunder Road's a little hard to classify. Sundowners, Night of the Hunter. He was tons of war films. That's probably his third main genre. But he could move around in an amazing variety of genres for one actor to be able to handle. It's really
They like putting him into World War II, especially. I think a lot of his war films, he's always in World War II, and it's like, and then it's either John Wayne or it's some other like kind of famous kind of guy as like the general or something, and he's the sergeant. And
right. Yeah. So no, and he had a way of playing soldiers that was such a relief. Someone said he's the greatest cliche dodger, some critic, in this genre, and it's true. He somehow would manage to circle his way around, to get around the worst cliches associated with the genre in his performances. And he was great in a melodrama directed by Vincent Minnelli, another director you would think it's not going to be, he was fussy. He was extraordinarily, the only word I can come up with is effeminate. There was always so much talk about Vincent Minnelli. He wore makeup. Is he bisexual? Is he gay? Is he this? Is he that? And he made macho type men. Frank Sinatra couldn't hardly deal with them at all, for example. Very nervous. But there, Robert Mitchum just seemed to work wonderfully with him in Home from the Hill. And he could play. He could rise to that bigger performance level that some people can't stand because they regard it as failed drama when people have to play at a larger sized role. And he had no trouble at all going up a level in dialogue, in huge emotional affect. He could just easily adjust his whole stance. He's wonderful in that movie too. So
ironically,
a huge list of favorites.
Another actor that really is like a genre bending, like to the point where he could be in any of these things and easily plays a soldier. Kirk Douglas kind of is the same. It's a completely different style of acting, but Kirk Douglas is another one of those people that, you can drop him into ancient Rome and he's all of a sudden in ancient Rome, and you're like, well, I guess Kirk Douglas is here. You could drop him into World War I with Paths of Glory. Like, he's another actor that kind of defies genre. So
and he was so ambitious that he was like determined to be able to slot himself in.
It's fascinating to see them going head to head in this way. Two people that really feel of their time. Like Kirk Douglas has this kind of almost frat boy-ish character in Out of the Past, and then Robert Mitchum has this incredibly hard bitten, heavy drinking and noir heavy in a lot of these things. But in this, the protagonist, and they clash like this because they're both these actors that can really just kind of defy genre, defy style, defy all of those things.
Interestingly, they both have, Mitchum's quite taller than Douglas, but they both have that crazy body type that certain men had in the 40s, especially, where they'd have shoulders, like huge shoulders and chests, and then it would taper suddenly down. So you never see them out of the bulky suits, especially in photos. Mitchum is like this when he's young.
They have the Family Guy had the bit in shape, out of shape guy from the 50s, and it was clearly based on Robert Mitchum.
Oh yeah, there were periods where he would just drink so much he'd lose his figure. He said one thing about being in prison was great. He said, I lost all this weight. I'm back in shape again. He was always drinking and then having to lose the weight till by the time he's middle aged. He just can't anymore. Whereas Douglas goes to his grave practically gym ripped. And so does Burt Lancaster. So the three of them all have that crazy, almost cartoon-like breadth of, you just don't see. Even people who live in the gym don't really have that crazy. I think it's hard labor of those times, being poor. They were all poor. They all came up poor. And eating, someone said, who was it? Who said it was eating a lot of meat. And hard labor has got to be it. Got to be the answer.
Well, Robert Mitchum, his last, his last couple decades, or his last, time period, on Earth, he makes his nut by being the beef. It's what's for dinner.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
right. He was the voice of beef. It's what's for dinner. He did have a wonderful. We haven't even mentioned that. He has a wonderfully deep baritone voice. Yeah. Yeah, that it makes for quite a nice singing voice if he's got the right material. So when he sings that hymn in Night of the Hunter, That's how he really entices.
I can never get that out of my head when it's like leaning,
Yeah.
leaning.
Yeah, it's both
But
how he
also,
entices the Shelley Winters
yeah.
character. He sings at a church picnic, and everyone's admiring him.
Going back to back also with Gregory Peck, another person who has that, you just can't escape that deep baritone.
The deep baritone,
He fills the whole space with it. I mean, whether it's whether he's playing Atticus Finch or whether he's in Cape Fear, like wherever you really see him, he has this like a space filling baritone, and it's crazy to see them go up against each other. They're having that scene in the in the diner where Gregory Peck threatens him right before Robert Mitchum gets beat up and ends up taking the things from the guys and beating them with it. And it's like right before that scene, they're doing this menacing back and forth. That's just it's almost under the surface at this point because they have those deep voices.
But one of the delights of the film, which Gregory Peck wouldn't want to hear, is how Gregory Peck tries to do his tough thing. Because again, he's got a great voice, big guy in that scene. And to me, it's part of the whole of, I've already argued this in our Cape Fear episode that we did for Movie Night Extravaganza, but it's just all about this Gregory Peck being more and more revealed as this hollow man. It can't possibly go up against this wily, scary, but also somehow self-amused figure of utter, not only toughness, which we're going to see in the end when he's in the water and he's he's grappling like he's a part alligator with people, but he's so much tougher and so much scarier that Gregory Peck trying to do is just, you're just like, man, don't even try.
It's like watching a 12-year-old try to like imitate their dad in a way.
It is. It's like someone trying to imitate a much bigger, tougher figure, and it's just hopeless. So I do love that about that scene. It's just like, wow, poor Gregory. And I think there was some hard feelings afterward because Robert Mitchum got all the notices. It was such a spectacular role for him. He had so much the better role, frankly, that he got all sorts of critical praise. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the same year that To Kill a Mockingbird comes out.
Well, exactly, and then Gregory Peck gets his own tsunami.
Like Gregory Peck's been like, I don't know, like stamped on the American history book from that role. Like it's To Kill a Mockingbird. The book is obviously going to be taught in school from now till from then till the end of time. And then that role, Gregory Peck, like I don't think there isn't another Atticus Finch. Like they can remake the movie, which they have done on multiple occasions, and it's still it's Gregory Peck that's going to go down as Atticus Finch.
Yeah, it's his role. It's his modern Lincoln role that he's was very suited to play for sure. Yeah, but if you watch a lot of Gregory Peck movies, he's a much more limited actor. Even though he's great as a villain, he hardly ever got a chance. He's great as a villain in Duel in the Sun. He's terrific. He's the most charismatic he ever was. But normally he's always the good. He has to be the stalwart good guy. And I quite like him in certain movies. Like I think he's great in The Big Country. It's a Western. He's a sea captain.
I watched. I don't know how. I went to Italy earlier this year, and it's like the first time I ever really left the United States, Canada, Mexico. Like I've been to Costa Rica and stuff, but this is the first time I ever left like this continent. And one of the movies I watched before going to Italy was Roman Holiday. And he's great. So, he's great in that.
Directors could get great things out of him. I mean, Hitchcock could get something out of him. Weiler could get things out of him. But
you do see why he was kind of limited, right? There is like he can do the like kind of like sassy romantic lead to a romantic comedy kind of thing where he's like a suave guy, or he can do the Atticus Finch thing. But it's like he doesn't really get that much of a chance to do kind of other things. I mean, you could also put him in a period drama or something. I mean, Moby Dick or something like that, and he get a performance out of him there too. But it's like the
number of moves he can make are just much smaller, I think, than what Mitchum could do. I think Mitchum had infinite variety to a far greater extent, anyway. But Gregory Peck, what people wanted from him pretty much showed he didn't even need infinite variety, so it worked out fine for him. But for me, there's like certain
iconic, and he had like a few of them. He had Moby Dick, he had he had To Kill a Mockingbird, but like the iconic roles, you really can't. Like there's certain actors that it's not like you can just murder, right? Like there's certain actors that it's like if you put them on screen and they kind of had a brutal death, it would kind of be the death of the American dream. in a way,
Yeah,
and
it's gonna
it's
be
like
hard to kill him,
it's
again,
traumatizing,
cool in
and
the sun,
oh,
yes, but
yeah.
nowhere else, nowhere else. Yeah, yeah. So, yes, Mitchum, we should probably wrap up. Final thoughts about Mitchum. It's very hard. I think we've said a lot, but
Yeah, I mean, I just the dichotomy, I guess, between Out of the Past, where he's a he fits in, he slots in so nicely to this noir
mm,
shadow kind of universe, and then kind of comparing that to the animalistic like otherworldly portrayals that he did in both Cape Fear
mm,
and Night of the Hunter, where
mm,
you get this like truly like like animal side to a person that
mm.
I've never even like seen or witnessed in other actors. It's kind of a like it's interesting to see those two, all those things stacked up.
Right, and who seemed so in touch with. I think it was part of his, he said some, oblique things at times about what he thought of, and he would say things that made it sound like he was almost a kind of film noir character himself. In that he said once something like, I wish reincarnation was right and I could come back as a human again and try to redeem myself." I think he had a very strong sense of having lived, I don't know, selfishly, sometimes kind of brutally, sometimes kind of in a way that didn't live up to what he thought he was capable of. So I think, he had an ability to draw on those kind of darker modes of like, I'm aware of my own. He wasn't religious, so I wouldn't say sin, but badness in myself. I always say he's in touch with his inner degenerate. He really is,
But
and he
that's
can
such a
draw on
noir, like a noir thing, right? Like also like it's such a like noir kind of feeling throughout these.
it.
There's always
Absolutely,
these characters that don't feel like they almost don't deserve to be redeemed in their own
right.
mind, and then at the end of the movie, they obviously usually are. I was
But then
also
he can go
interested.
to tap it, he can tap the far worst of it, which is the Max Cady, the
Yeah,
Harry Powell.
his son, I think Christopher, not the son that he cast and things, but his other son, Christopher,
Yeah,
um, said this thing where I was kind of fascinated by, where
yeah.
he said that he actually never really quite understood what his dad did for a living, because he would come home and it would just be a different universe. He says
Mm.
when he realized like what a big deal his dad was one night Elvis Presley came to the house and was playing piano in their
Oh
living
my
room,
gosh.
and Mitchum was singing along with Elvis Presley, and he said like all of these people were like family friends, and they wouldn't talk about the craft of acting in front of the kids. They wouldn't, that they would
Yeah.
just kind of hang out, and so it's like these are family friends. So one
Mhm.
day he realized Elvis is sitting there playing the piano and
You
Robert
can
is
draw
singing
Elvis.
along, and
Yeah.
then and he sits
Yeah.
down for dinner with them, and the kids he was starstruck, and he's like, that's what I thought of as a star, not my dad, like
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. No, and even Robert Mitchum would say, he tells the story of when he was being besieged at some hotel where he was staying, and he wakes him and his wife up, and he says to Dorothy, "Why are they making such a big deal?" I mean, he said, "You've been married to me for, whatever it was at the time, 25, 30
Yeah.
years, and you're not impressed." And she said, "Bob," and this is the days when, it was movie theaters and they were big, and she's like, "You are what projected on the screen, they are the size of your left nostril. You're
Yeah.
projected huge in the world." So, and he's like, "Oh." So he could have this quality, of course, it's his own tale, so you don't know, but he could have this quality sometime of true naive. I say that was his naivete. Sometimes he really didn't get it. Like, why is this big? And someone would have to tell him. But at other times, he seems so canny so canny and un, unable to be controlled or manipulated by people. One of my favorite stories is of him slapping the face off Otto Preminger. Because Otto Preminger, it was had a sadistic streak, and he wanted in Angel Face, he wanted film noir, he wanted Mitchum to slap Gene Simmons, and he kept asking for really, and he kept asking for more takes. And Gene Simmons barely comes tiny, petite, barely comes up to his shoulder, so he has to do it a couple of times. And he was not mean to women; he just wasn't.
Yeah.
And finally, Preminger wants another, and he turns and slaps the hell out of him and says, "What do you think? Do you want another take?" So there's just beautiful stories of him just like, you couldn't do that. I mean, but he did things, and sometimes for really honorable motives. They're kind of remarkable.
There's another story where he he said that he wanted coffee on set, and they said, "Oh yeah, well we can get you coffee on set," and he's like, "No, we're working these crazy hours. I want
Mm.
like I want coffee for
everyone.
everybody. Like, yeah, I don't just want to sit here with coffee while everyone else is struggling. And they said, well, we're not going to do that. We're not going to get coffee for everybody on set. Like we can't just get coffee for everyone on set. So he picks up and he goes, oh, I hate this coffee. I want better coffee. So he leaves for like 3 hours and comes back. And then the next day he does the exact same thing. He's like, I don't want this coffee. So he leaves for 3 hours. He comes back. And finally at RKO, they get the hint, like, he's doing
we
this.
better come up with coffee.
Yeah.
Yes, this is what I mean.
So then everyone on the set gets coffee after that. And
he was very crew sensitive, though. He tells a funny story about Marilyn Monroe, and he makes himself one of the bad guys, where they're on the raft in River, and there's huge water spray, so they're being sprayed by a crewman, and it's freezing cold water, but Marilyn Monroe gets all upset, and he says she almost made a little whimper, and he's like, "What's the matter?" And she says, "Well, the poor guy, the crew guy, he's soaked and he's freezing, he's shivering." And Robert Mitchum is like, "Well, he's hitting me with a cannon of cold water, so I think he's okay." But he's like, "No, that was her. She was so sensitive to the crew." But he talks so sweetly about Marilyn Monroe and so seriously, because he knew her before. He worked with her husband at Lockheed Aircraft. And he's just like, she was such a sweet, insecure, lost girl. And really very solemn about her. And it was like refreshing, because usually men are like, what a bod, or whatever. And he was really very kind, but that he was impressed. So finally, someone else is actually paying any attention to what's happening to the damn crew. So that's heartwarming.
Yeah.
He was very labor sensitive, especially early in his career. Very, very. Politically, he's a little shaky, because I think he's natural, anti-establishment tendencies all through his younger years, and I don't think he was politically active, but would put him on. He was suspected of being a communist. It's only later in life he becomes a very hardcore conservative, and that's a little tough to read.
Yeah, but there's a very it's hard to really gauge it, because I think
so many people
there's this personal. Well, there's this personal connection everyone had to Reagan, right? Where it's like Reagan's one of the people that when he had his 1948 marijuana arrest, it's like Reagan's one of the people that he would go to, because obviously he's head of the Screen Actors Guild, and it's like, you need a favor, and it's like, hey, I don't want my kids seeing these pictures, and Reagan was one of them. So it's like you never really know all of these old Hollywood types that later became conservative. It's like, how much of it is really being drawn in by this, by the old Gipper?
Well, or just cultural changes that started to make them nervous. They couldn't go that far. So, James Cagney, same thing, was lefty for years, and then started moving right. Frank Sinatra did. You could go down a long list. It was very.
You see. I mean, I think Jimmy Stewart, no matter what, would have.
He was always conservative.
Yeah, but there's this. During the time of like Reagan's like presidency, Jimmy Stewart was kind of attached to the hip to him, and it's like he's like, I don't know. I saw this really funny Jimmy Stewart sketch where it's Jimmy Stewart and Dean Martin, and Jimmy Stewart's like, I can do all these impressions, and every impression is just his own voice, but he's like, oh, and he's like, watch this, I can do this, but every single time he's just doing the Jimmy Stewart.
He's doing his indelible voice. Yeah. It's true. Nobody does Mitchum.
Yeah, I think it's
a big actor, but
even on SNL when they wanted to do the, like, they didn't cast somebody else to be like, it's just Mitchum and Jane Greer in that sketch.
Yeah, and there's no one doing. I'm trying to think if they was ever. I never saw an impersonation. He's just not one of those people that it's easy to impersonate.
He also switches his accent up so much; it's kind of hard to do.
Yeah, and again, he really does move, not in too overt ways usually, but he'll adjust his accent for regions. He's got great regional conveyor, as I said before. So I could go on and on. We've gone on a long time enough, probably. So yeah, we should probably stop. We're like
apparently the one person I just looked it up. The one person that has a Robert Mitchum impression is Liam Neeson. Apparently.
Oh, no way! Oh, I would love to see that. Well, I'll have to check that out. That I'm gonna see. Okay, so that's going to be it, I think, for our episode. We're calling it Robert Mitchum Comes Out of the Past. Thanks to our listeners, and of course, triple thanks to our subscribers who keep us in, I'm just going to say, marijuana and hard liquor. If you're not a subscriber yet, but you like what you hear, please consider signing up with Patreon for all the Filmsite content, instead of just the half that's available to the public and now available to view on YouTube, including this one will be. You can follow News of the Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Thank you so much for coming. Forrest. It was really delightful to talk Mitchum with you. Let me know, tell me, what's coming up for you in Movie Night Extravaganza. Any
Well,
plugs?
we're doing Supergirl on Wednesday.
How are you?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen it yet, so I
haven't
don't know.
either. Yeah,
Yeah,
I pitched it as something to be reviewed, and it didn't get. Yeah, it wasn't okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm gonna go see it tomorrow. I think probably at the movie theater. But
Yeah.
besides that, I think we're doing like a lot of blockbusters. I think we're doing Terminator and Terminator 2, and
Oh,
then
fun.
we're doing the Christopher Nolan Batman movies leading up to the Odyssey coming out. So
Right.
that's kind of what we have coming up. I mean, it's kind of it's a different direction than what we usually do, I feel like, because a lot of times we've been doing like older movies, or we've been doing a lot of like classic stuff, or I guess we've been doing more new stuff, without kind of blindly going in lately. But yeah, so that's our stuff for the summer. The summer we usually kind of do blockbusters. That's kind of
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, and of course everyone has to do Odyssey. I had to persuade Dolores. Look, we have to do. Neither of us are big Christopher Nolan fans, but I'm like, look, it's sitting there like a monolith in the middle of summer. There's no avoiding it. We have to do Odyssey.
Yeah.
So we will be too. We're going to be on Odyssey, dude. Must be done. Well, it's been delightful. I've enjoyed it so much. I hope all you viewers and listeners feel the same, and join us in 2 weeks for more righteous Film Site conversation. Until then, we wish you happy viewing. Bye now.